One, President Joe Biden's being led around on the stage by his hand by Barack Obama, and we are to believe that he can lead the free world. Two, the virtue of masculinity, with the host of Making the Argument, a former Green Beret combat veteran, a Virginia House Delegate representative, Nick Freitas, joins us on the Will Cain Show. And three, so you're telling me there's a chance, step one, in an epic, historic comeback in the NBA Finals, Will Cain, the good luck charm for the Dallas Mavericks. It is the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. You can always join us by just subscribing on Apple or Spotify. You can subscribe on YouTube as well. The link is in the text description right underneath this live stream. You can catch the Will Cain Show whenever, however you like. Jump into the comments section and become a member here at the Will Cain Show. I woke up this morning and one of my friends, one of our guest hosts here, and a Fox Business host, sent me a text. It was former Wisconsin Congressman Sean Duffy. He sent me a text to a link to an article from the Daily Mail. The headline read as follows: Sean Duffy tells wife and mother of 9 children she looked better when she worked out. I thought, uh-oh, this happened on Fox and Friends weekend. Rachel hosts her very well-rated and entertaining segment, Pop Culture Roundup, every Saturday and Sunday. And she has a rotating crew of guests that come and hang out with her in front of the big wall, and they talk about things going on in pop culture. This is often a time that Hegseth and I will sit on the curvy couch and eat a little breakfast and watch. And I watch. Sometimes I shoot the shit with the crew. We talk about, European soccer, or we make fun of Hegseth. But oftentimes during Pop Culture Roundup, we'll just hang. We'll just watch whatever fat they're chewing over there on Pop Culture Roundup. And when I heard Duffy say, in discussing a comment by celebrity trainer Jillian Michaels on the Sage Steele show, when I heard Duffy say, "You never looked better," two-a-days, young establishment James, "you never looked better than when you were doing the Jillian Michaels workout, Rachel," I immediately went, uh-oh.
That's really tough.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't go down that road ever in my life, but wow.
Yeah. He made his way over to the couch, and I said, I looked at Hegseth immediately, and I go, whew, ballsy. And Hegseth recognized the moment as well and giggled. And when Sean came over to the couch to just kind of hang during the commercial break, I said, wow, that was something. And he didn't really, I don't think it even resonated with him, and they just kind of all moved on. Little did he know he'd wake up on Monday morning to a Daily Mail headline throwing his marriage under the bus. Listen to this, guys. This is how they wrote it up. Fox News host Sean Duffy divided viewers after he told Rachel Campos Duffy she looked better when she was doing Jillian Michaels' workout routine on Fox. It goes on to explain that they both were former hosts of MTV's, or former stars of MTV's The Real World. And when Duffy said, quote, "By the way, you never looked better than when you were doing the Jillian Michaels workout," Campos Duffy said, "I did do a workout, and I did get the Michaels workout. We had her on, and she's like, you got to get back on it, Rachel. I do. I got to do it." And then the Daily Mail goes on to talk about how this, as they say, divided viewers. And you know what they did, fellas? They grabbed a few tweets.
Oh, boy.
It's like, some people on Twitter were upset. Stop the presses. You were able to find some tweets. They have now, this is their source. They've quoted Blue Dash 12, who's not to be confused with Blue Dash 11 or Blue Dash 13, but the renowned.
Important source.
Yes, The always reliable Blue-12 said misogyny is normalized on Fox. No birth control for her.
Wow.
Gestated 9 children, and her husband, Sean Duffy, tells her to get back into shape. Handmaid's Tale. Handmaid's Tale. But not to be outdone, because they've got multiple deep throat sources out there in the X-verse. They also have Kajo 503 as a reliable source who says, OMG, only on Fox. You don't do this to the mother of your 9 children anywhere, anytime. Fox News host Sean Duffy humiliates wife Rachel Campos Duffy on air because she looked better when she was working out. When she was doing the Jillian Michaels workout, to be specific. This is... the funny thing is, as you guys and I laughed, and I noticed in the moment, I was like, whew, Sean, interesting comment. The truth is, this on one hand, you have completely ridiculously absurd journalism quoting a few angry tweets. And I think on the other hand, you have a healthy relationship. Yeah, I made fun of Sean because you can kind of see that coming down the road. You know, you could have swerved out of the way of that pothole. You didn't have to do that. But the truth is, when we all do that, Dan, you're engaged, I'm married. The truth is, we're engaging in a little bit of dishonesty. Like when your fiance two-a-days or my wife says, hey, I need to start working out again, don't I? And you're like, no, you look great.
You look amazing. I've never seen you look better.
Right. What do you think of this outfit? Super. All we're doing is making a calculated decision in that moment of, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
Honesty's not worth it. And Sean, to his credit, was just being authentic and being honest. And you know who didn't mind the honesty and authenticity? Rachel. She didn't get upset. She didn't even notice. But Kajo 503 did. And Blue Duck 12 did. And therefore, then, the Daily Mail did. And this is just, it's just also dishonest.
So you're saying...
Hey, speaking... Go ahead.
No, you're saying I'm getting married this year, like you said. So you're saying I shouldn't do this going forward in my marriage because we're not there yet. But should I take this as advice? Is what you're saying?
I think you can make the calculation here of whether or not it's worth it.
Yeah.
What about suggesting a group activity? We should play pickleball together. We should train for a half marathon together.
Just let it be, dude. In my estimation, just let it be. But hey, I don't begrudge the Duffys for their authenticity. Hey, and speaking of authenticity and honesty, there's a bit missing. Story number 1. Speaking of honesty, there's absolutely none when it comes to Joe Biden. The lie we're being sold is this 81-year-old is ready to do another 4 years as leader of the free world. News came out last week about him wandering around the G7 summit being led by Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. That happened again this weekend as he raised $28 million in a Democratic fundraiser with former President Barack Obama and a host of celebrities. But when it was all said and done, he had to be led off stage by Barack Obama. It was noticed, and you can see in some of these videos, that he stood. Some say he yet again froze. His hand was grabbed eventually by Barack Obama, and he was led off stage. He literally needs to be stage managed. He's being led, and we're being told that he can lead the free world. It's embarrassing that this decrepit old man is the president of the United States. It's even more embarrassing that, and that's not a partisan point. Get real. This man is out to lunch. This man is not there. He's not running on all his cylinders. And it's just even more embarrassing that there's a propaganda arm in the United States intent on telling us that up is down and black is white. No matter what Joe Scarborough or Mika Brzezinski of MSNBC tell us that Trump is actually one that's slipping, or David Pakman comes on the Will Cain Show and tells us that there's no evidence that Joe Biden is doing anything, I guess, from a performance-enhancing drug to getting an extra 7 hours of sleep before a debate or a State of the Union. This is clearly, to all of our, I guess, as you would say, lying eyes, not a man who can run the country. But they're so steeped at this point in dishonesty and stupidity that nothing should surprise you. I want you to watch this 1 minute from CNN, which, by the way, features my Fox and Friends co-host Pete Hegseth. And, oh, yeah, features me from back in the day, I think, when I did some appearances on CNN.
It's not a democracy. Okay, democracy is actually not as good as you think it is.
But for centuries, America has celebrated its democracy.
Democracy is worth dying for.
Democracy remains the definition of political legitimacy.
But some Republicans and pro-Trump media are pushing the idea that America is not a democracy.
The United States of America is not a democracy. We are a constitutional republic.
The United States of America is not a democracy. You don't want to be in a democracy.
We are not a democracy. We are a republic.
Is America a democracy?
America is a democracy. It was founded as a democracy.
I've heard a lot of conspiracy theories. I hear a lot of things out on the road. But to hear Americans, people who would describe themselves as patriots, say that America is not a democracy, that stopped me in my tracks.
You are hearing people say America is not a democracy because there are people around Trump who want them to be saying that.
You are hearing people say America is not a democracy because America is not a democracy. That's why people are saying it's not a democracy, because America is not a democracy. It is, as I said, probably some 10 years ago, a constitutional republic. By the way, two-a-days, young son, what is that guy's accent? Who is our current, correspondent at CNN reporting on the nature of American constitutional governance? What is that accent?
I think it's a little Irish, laddie, this is not a democracy, laddie.
I guess
I think that's what it is.
I guess CNN just doesn't have the gym that Fox does in the basement. That seems to be the issue.
He says udder, like a cow udder.
Yeah.
Udder. And I'm like, this is who you've assigned to understanding the nature of American governance and checks and balances and the founder's vision? Have you ever heard of James Madison? Thomas Jefferson? You ever heard of George Washington? You ever heard of the checks and balances? You ever heard of a constitutional republic? We are not a democracy, and this whole piece is designed to make us feel like, should you say it's not a democracy, you're an extremist. The purpose of a constitutional democracy, by the way, is to protect the rights of minorities. That's the whole point. Majority rule is the nature of democracy. You have no rights under democracy. Your only rights are those that are granted to you by the majority. A constitution protects those rights from the majority will of a democratic vote. That's the whole point. And now, I don't know, I guess the virtuous thing to do is to say you have no rights. Majority wins, majority rules. We're not a constitution. Assign some Irishman to tell us, or Ann Applebaum on the Council on Foreign Relations to tell us it's extremist to point out accurately that we are a constitutional republic. And it's misinformation to point out accurately that the leader of the free world is wandering around stages, staged, managed, and led by the, at times, Prime Minister of Italy, or in the most perfect analogy of images, the former President of the United States, led by Barack Obama. We need to be led by strong men, and the host of Making the Argument, former Green Beret, current Virginia House Delegate, Nick Freitas, the host of Making the Argument, joins us next to talk about the virtue, the necessity of masculinity, next on The Will Cain Show.
And co-anchor of America's Newsroom. Join me for my brand new podcast, Perino on Politics. Listeners of Everything Will Be Okay will gravitate toward this podcast too. Every Monday, I'm going to talk to people I trust in politics as they tell me what they're seeing and thinking in the 2024 election cycle. As they prep me to cover the upcoming election, they'll prep you, the voters, too. Make sure you subscribe to this series on FoxNewsPodcast.com or wherever you download podcasts and leave a rating and review.
This is an election year unlike any other.
That's why you need America's #1 most watched news source, Fox News. Stay with us
all the way to election night.
The candidates
are ready.
I believe in America. I believe in you, the American people.
We will fight for America like no one has ever fought before.
Americans across the country are ready.
And so are we.
This is Democracy 24.
Your freedom, your vote.
Fox News.
America is watching.
From the Fox News Podcast Network.
I'm Emily Campagno, and this is the Fox True Crime Podcast.
And I had nothing to do with her disappearance, but people still accuse me of it.
I sit down with the people who lived the nightmares.
I was in shock. I was just devastated.
The investigators who tirelessly worked on the case.
I feel for their families, and I really hope that they can catch this guy.
Bringing you closer to the story than you ever thought possible.
Listen and follow now at foxnewspodcasts.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Why have young men swung so far to the right while young women seem to be swinging so far to the left? There's no bigger political divide today than that between young men and young women. It's the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com. Fox News YouTube channel, Fox News Facebook page. Hit subscribe, Apple, Spotify, or on YouTube. Nick Freitas is big on YouTube. He's the host of Making the Argument. He's also a current Virginia House delegate. He's a Green Beret combat veteran. He joins us now on the Will Cain Show. What's up, Nick?
Hey, doing well, Will. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm glad to have you on the show. I heard that you were giggling a little bit about my co-host throwing his wife under the bus on TV. You know, the funny thing is, Nick,
it's a bold move, Cotton. We'll see how it works out.
It was a bold move. Now, here's the question. Like, I kind of pride myself, Nick, on being able to seeing what's coming down the road. Like, you know, if I say this, there are some people that will interpret it as this, and then, you know, but I sometimes begin to think that's not a virtue. Like, just say it and let them freak out how they're going to freak out. Don't try to inoculate what you have to say on all the misinterpretations. Now, I don't know if Sean saw that coming down the road, but I like that he just did it, whether or not he saw it and rejected it or not, because the truth is his marriage is strong enough, and she wasn't upset. That was just, it's a relationship built upon, get this, honesty.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. We just did a podcast not long ago with Lauren Colbert, who's she's the host of The Dadvocate. And one of the things she has is women splaining men to women. And we were talking a lot about this. And I was saying, you know, Lauren, you know, you just have this very reasonable approach, the way you look at all of this. And she goes, well, look, Nick, it's really simple. In your relationships, when you're married to someone that you love, you should start off with, let's not assume the worst possible intention they could have had when they said something, right? Let's begin with, they probably didn't mean to offend me or to set me off or to be a horrible human being. Start from there. And then if someone needs to refine their language a little bit or the words that they use, fine. But don't, you know, and again, like you said, I think we should be careful with the words that we use to make sure that we're properly understood. But I could not care less if Twitter gets mad at something I say. Like, that's, in fact, I usually welcome it.
But that's the trap. I think I have that same instinct. I want to choose my words in a way to ensure that I am properly understood. But then sometimes you start going, well, how could people misunderstand what I have to say? As though, and look, I can make mistakes. I do make mistakes in my word choice or how I communicate. But I just think there's so much now in the conversational ecosphere that will intentionally misinterpret what you have to say, has no interest in actually understanding what you have to say, and in fact has an interest in spinning negatively what you had to say. And now you're caught in like this unwinnable trap.
Oh yeah, no, that's absolutely true. There's this it's this propaganda feel toward it, to where whenever you say something that they think can be manipulated in such a way to harm you, they will harm you. And you have some people that fall into this idea that, oh, well, if I just apologize or clarify it, that's going to make everything better. It's like, no, it's actually going to make it worse with somebody who's not being intellectually honest and who has no interest in the truth. If the purpose was to make you look bad, then you actually apologizing makes you look worse. And they're just going to find a new thing to attack you on. So you never surrender to the mob. Never surrender to the mob. You know, if you've said something that you think should have been clarified, it's perfectly fine to talk to somebody who has good intentions and wants to have a civil discussion to clarify remarks. But the moment you give into the mob, just understand they're coming back with even more firepower.
So that's interesting, Nick. And again, so Nick hosts the show Making the Argument, very successful on YouTube. And you talk about masculinity a lot. You know, I don't know where I built my vision of masculinity, Nick, and I know this is kind of shorthand, but I don't know. Somewhere along the line, if I'm being real rudimentary and dumbing it down, it begins to look something like John Wayne. What I mean is like it's a little stoic, it's very masculine. It's got a bit of swagger, but it would never be over the top and braggadocious, And I do think there's this weird thing, and I think we start with self-reflection. There's this thing on the right where masculinity has become almost cartoonish. It's very braggadocious. What made me think of it is you saying like never apologize. Well, I actually think a man does apologize. I think a man does admit when he's wrong. And you didn't say he shouldn't just now, but it's calculating when that is in front of an audience that deserves it because the relationship is built upon that authenticity versus someone just looking for that chink in your armor, looking for that weakness.
Well, and that's what's the purpose of the conversation you're having with somebody. Like I had somebody asking me, like, what do you mean when you say masculinity? And I said, well, if I wanted to break it down in its simplest terms, what does it mean to me when somebody looks at me and says, be a man? Well, typically what it means is fulfill your responsibilities regardless of the pain or the discomfort associated with it. That's the basic, most fundamental level of what I hear when somebody says be a man. Okay, well, what does it take to do that? Well, of course, you've got to have intellectual maturity. You've got to have emotional maturity. You've got to have physical capability. You have to have all those things if you're going to be the sort of person that when they find themselves in a difficult situation where doing your job, right, fulfilling your responsibilities, keeping your word has actual real life consequences. The only way you're going to be able to do that is if you have that sort of maturity, that sort of capability along those lines of emotional, intellectual, physical, and I would also argue spiritual and professional. That's how you achieve what I would call genuine masculinity. And look, when we're looking at masculine traits, of course you have a trait. A trait is a trait, right? It can have a positive manifestation or it can have a negative manifestation. And the goal of genuine masculinity is to make sure that all of those traits are being used toward a good and noble purpose.
I have a friend that says what you said just now. He says this a lot. I always find when we're touching on this conversation, I find it fascinating. He used the word trait, like you. He said, look, so-and-so, whatever that person may be, has trouble with the truth or whatever, but that's just a trait of theirs. And it's like a combination of traits make up, I guess, a character, right? Your character, whatever it may be. But it's like, it's almost when you think about these traits, like you just said, each trait has a positive and a negative. I don't know. It's not that you become more forgiving, but you become more understanding of other people.
Oh, sure. Well, and
putting things through the framework of traits.
I think that goes basically into the whole intellectual and emotional maturity. What does that mean? So, for instance, it became real popular to do this whole thing where it's like, oh, men should cry and men should be vulnerable and men should be able to discuss their feelings. And it's like, okay, but here's what we found is that the people that are hardest on us when we do that are women, right? So this idea that it's just a bunch of men getting around and we don't have the time to talk to one another. No, actually, women are the hardest on us when we show vulnerability. And I don't. And I want to clarify this. It's not that I don't think men should have the emotional maturity to understand. I just walked my oldest daughter down the aisle, right, to get married. And when we did our father of the bride dance, I'm going to tell you right now, man, I lost it. I lost it because I love that little girl more than life itself. And she's going off to get married. And yeah, I was overcome with just the emotion of how proud I am of her, how proud I am of them as a married couple. And she deserved to see that vulnerability in me. She deserved to see that tenderness in me, right? But I don't give that to everybody. Not everybody gets that. Why? Because I also have to be prepared to be the sort of man that can protect and provide for my family. And I can't do that if every time something emotional comes up, I'm losing it because I got to cry or discuss my feelings. And so it goes back to that idea of understanding, and that's where the maturity component comes in. Where do these traits, how do they manifest in a particular situation? And do you have the maturity to understand that, yes, in this situation, this is appropriate, and this one, it's not. But under no circumstances, this is one thing that I think should be key to masculinity. Under no circumstances am I supposed to be weak. Tender at times, yes. Loving at times, absolutely. Understanding, forgiving, merciful, yes. But never weak. I'm supposed to be strong as a man. I'm supposed to be strong for the people that I love. I'm supposed to be strong for the things that I value, so that my children, my wife, my children could know that I can be the safe harbor in the storm. And then every once in a while, when it's one of those moments, when it's safe, when it's appropriate, yeah, they get to see that side of me that nobody else gets because it's for them.
You know, most polling shows that, as I said in your introduction here, one of the biggest political divides is between young men and young women. Like young men, and I'm talking about even into their teenage years now, into their early 20s, are increasingly swinging to the right. You know, we talk a lot about young people and Gen Z, millennial, whatever it may be. But most of the stuff we see it appears to be, from the polling perspective, a minority of men and a super majority of young women. The majority of young men are actually, you know, swinging to the right. How do you explain what's happening between young men and young women?
I think there's a couple of things. I said, one, I think that when you look at fourth wave feminism and you look at this kind of oppressor-oppressed dynamic, one of the things that political parties in this country have essentially done is they've created this false dynamic where if you fit into this category, you're the oppressed. And so we're going to be the ones to take care of you, right? It's going to be our political party. It's going to be the government. It's going to be those things. And the things that are oppressing you are men or masculinity or traditional marriage or gender roles or anything like that. And so it's this whole effort to tear away that and to replace it with kind of a new vision and a new cultural reality. And we could talk at length about critical theory and Antonio Gramsci and all of that. But the bottom line of it is that men, especially young men, for the long time have now been putting up with, I would say, over like a decade, maybe 2 decades of this idea that you're bad and you're the source of all the problems. And, you know, I'd rather be in the woods with a bear than you. And you got young men looking around going, okay, wait a second. I know there were legitimate causes. I know there's legitimate issues, but I'm 16. How am I responsible for any of this crap? And then it translates into this whole idea that no, by virtue of you being a man, you're the problem. And now you have to give penance and you have to go through this struggle session. And I think enough young men got to the point where it's like, you know what? This doesn't make sense. This is crap. And I'm not going to do it. And now the real battle that's going on right now is which direction are young men going to take? Because it's not just about right and left. It's about how do they view what it means to actually be a man? Is it just this idea of, hey, I've got the power because I'm physically stronger, and success to me is how many women can I sleep with and how many, cars can I own and everything else? Or is it going to be that idea of no, that there's a perspective of manhood, there's a position of manhood which says, I have a job and a duty to be honorable and noble and to use the strengths that I have in service to something greater than myself, which usually manifests itself in being a husband and being a father. And the thing that I always tell some of my more feminist colleagues is, look, you're not going to win. You're not going to win the argument because young men don't buy it. And so you get to choose what sort of young men are going to be the men that are going to be, going into those positions of leadership here in the next decade. Do you want them to be men that utilize their gifts, their powers, their strengths to something noble? Or do you want them to be a bunch of unrepentant hedonists that are pretty much tired of your crap? Because that is going to be one of the two directions. And so I think it's critical that men step up and say, no, there is a standard of our conduct. And we do have an obligation. I believe it's biblical, right? But other people just say it's just genuine manhood. Fine. We need to step up and we need to actually show a path where it's like, no, you don't have to put up with this garbage, and you certainly don't have to put up with this narrative. But you do want to be honorable. You do want to be the sort of man from which society can be built and which genuine femininity can flourish.
So that vision, that battle you describe is, I think we all understand what you're talking about. I mean, we've all seen the rise of Andrew Tate, and you're describing Andrew Tate. In essence, so how many women can I sleep with? How many fancy cars can I buy? I have a middle school son, and I don't know if this came from Andrew Tate, but we were talking about this last night. Are you doing this ironically? But they're always talking about that's so Sigma. I'm sure you've heard that, Nick, right?
Yeah,
Sigma?
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I've heard that.
Like the goal is no longer to be alpha, right? An alpha is a leader of men. a Sigma is a lone wolf. So Sigma. I'm like, why is that? That's not good. Like, why do you? Everybody wants to be like, instead of a samurai, they want to be a ninja out on their own, creeping around, doing, slitting throats and doing their own thing. They want to be the assassin, not the Green Beret. I don't know what it is, or I guess I do know. It's pretty shallow, and you can see the appeal of that battle you described, of that hedonistic Andrew Tate style vision of manhood versus, I assume, one that you're championing here today and on your channel. Like that's the vision of manhood you're selling. It's a harder sell, by the way.
It is.
But I think I hope it's a successful sell.
Well, Ken, and let me say something too here, because obviously there's a lot of disagreements I have with things that Andrew Tate has done and said. But if you're looking at it from Andrew Tate's perspective, and he's been given two options, you're either going to be the sheep or you're going to be the wolf. He's like, well, damn, I'm going to be the wolf then. But if that's the only options that you're giving me, then I'll be this, because I'm sure as hell not going to be that. And the whole argument is to come forward and say, no, there is another option here. I mean, if you want to use like a pop culture reference, right? And this is one of the reasons why I think Tolkien was just so brilliant, is because there's so much depth to the things that he writes about. But if you look at the whole character of like Aragorn in the Lord of the Rings, right? At one point he's the ranger, right? He's kind of off by himself. He's strong, he's capable, he's powerful, but he's not really living up to his responsibilities and his role. And it isn't until later on and through all that character development that he really kind of finally embraces that, yeah, this is my job. I can't just go off on my own and be kind of the lone badass, right? Like I've got to step up. I have to lead. People depend on me and I need to be there for them. And that's the part that here's the other thing I wish people would understand about this. It's not just about the honor of it. It's also the fulfillment and the meaning and the purpose of it. One of the greatest things God ever gave me as a man was not just, the drive that I think to fulfill my role as part of his creation, but it was marrying my wife, right? Having my kids. And I think some people look at that and are like, well, anybody can get married. Anybody can have kids. Yeah, anybody can have a wedding. Anybody can sire children. That's very, very different than building a life with somebody, building a marriage with somebody, building a family. That takes work. That takes effort. That takes sacrifice. But as I just witnessed, right, again, walking my oldest daughter down the aisle and being so overwhelmed with pride in the woman that she has become, and the work that my wife and I did, that she did, all that together, I'm looking at it going, there's things I can point to in my life. There's things I can point to in my life that anybody on the outside looking in would say from a reasonable level, okay, that was an element of success, right? You were a Green Beret, right? You got your Ranger tab. You were sniper qualified. You went to combat. You're an elected official. You're in the Virginia House of Delegates, right? These are things that you could point to and say, yes, that's an accomplishment. And I think it's one that you could rightly look at it and say is accomplishment. Hear me when I tell you it pales in comparison to that one moment dancing with my daughter and having her look at me and say, Daddy, you did a good job. Oh, man, you want to talk about just wrecking me in an instant. Like there is no amount, knowing what that feels like now, I'm telling you right now, I'd crawl through broken glass to hear it. And that's the part that I want young men to understand is I'm not asking you to give up all of this stuff that kind of looks cool superficially. I'm asking you to look beyond that to something that is far more powerful, far more meaningful, and that you are going to look back on one day and say, gosh, that was worth it. Man, that was worth it.
That was beautifully well said, Nick. I'm curious, what do you think is the best pop culture representation of the character you just described? Like we've talked, we recognize, and I want to come back to Andrew Tate in a second in the way that you described. We recognize the popularity of Andrew Tate. Okay, you just used Aragorn. I was never that into Lord of the Rings. Now I want to give it another shot. But what is the best example? I mean, what you're describing is actually the true hero arc story of humanity, or we wouldn't be here today. Like that character you just described is the one that has put humanity on its shoulders and driven it forward through all of its great achievements. And yet I still think, it needs its champion today. It needs its character. It needs its turned into the superhero that people aspire to be. Otherwise, they do aspire to the wolf.
Yeah. I don't know that I could point to a contemporary character that describes what I just described. There's certainly been, again, I think Aragon on Lord of the Rings was a good reference toward it. I certainly grew up watching John Wayne, and there were certainly John Wayne movies that I thought exemplified that. But I think, and again, I'll go back to my faith. I mean, Christ is the ultimate representation. But if we're talking about also that role of people that are again willing to sacrifice, willing to stand up and do what's best for their families, their children, I think it's unfortunate that I can't point to a modern contemporary character and say, oh yeah, it's that.
Right.
And I think that's intentional. If I'm being honest, I think that is intentional. I think that Hollywood for some time now has decided to throw out any vestige of the old storytelling where we could look at heroes, even flawed heroes, that went through an enormous amount of development to become the sort of people that we could like and admire. I think if you look at what Disney did to Star Wars, it was all about killing your old heroes and then replacing them with characters that had no arc, no journey. They just showed up, and their only flaw was they didn't believe in themselves enough. And it's this idea that, well, this is the new message. These are your new heroes. Abandon your old ones and accept these. No, because fundamentally we know something is wrong with that. But honestly, what I'm hoping people are going to see more heroics in, and I would love to see it reflected on the big screen, right? I would love to see it reflected in pop culture, but I want to see it reflected more in just families. I'm very grateful to the fact that I could look and look, my mom and dad got divorced when I was 3, but both of them stayed involved. Both of them, exemplified something for me that I got traits out of both that, where with my dad being a strong man and a homicide detective. And I remember always wanting to live up to this ideal of, my dad goes out there and he helps people. He wakes up out of a dead sleep at 2:00 in the morning because he's the one they call when someone is needed. Right. And my mother was a nurse, went all over the world helping people in need. And it was that idea of caring and nurturing and being willing to put herself in danger to do it when she felt called to do it. And so when I think about the heroics that have been the most influential in me, I'm actually very grateful. I'm not looking to a superhero. I'm looking to people that were in my life, right, whether it was family, whether it was friends, whether it was people I served with overseas, where I know for a fact I can pick up the phone right now to some guy I haven't talked to in 3 years and say, hey, man, I need you. And he'd be on a plane. Why? Because we went through some stuff together in combat. And if I say I need you, he knows I do. And he could do the exact same thing, and I would do that for him as well. And that's where we're going to find more of it. It's going to be more in just people stepping up and fulfilling those roles, keeping their word, and being willing to demonstrate, being willing to sacrifice for something greater than themselves.
Again, that's awesome. It's really well said. And that's what we're trying to protect, though. We're trying to protect the existence of that hero in everyday society, in every home, in every family, in every service. And I think you and I both worried about losing it from, honestly, both sides of the attack, And by the way, just to put a button on that Andrew Tate thing, I don't know if you used a good analogy. It was kind of interesting. He had two choices. He could be a sheep or he could be a wolf. And he's like, well, I'm not going to be a sheep, so I choose the wolf. It reminds me of that scene in American Sniper. I don't know if Chris Kyle is sitting at the dinner table with his dad, talking about Navy SEAL sniper Chris Kyle, and his dad says there's 3 types of people. There's sheep, there's wolves, and there's sheepdog. And he's like, and we are not raising sheep or wolves in this house. And he says it in more colorful language and explains it. But the whole point is to be that third option that essentially you're describing, which is the sheepdog, the dog that protects the sheep from the wolf.
Yeah. No, and that was one of the things we used to talk about in the military is that, and it was always important to understand as well, because sometimes sheep has a negative connotation, and I understand that. But the whole purpose when we talked about it from the idea of you had civilization, you had civilians and civilization, you had the threat to civilians and civilization called the barbarians, whatever it was. And we were the ones that stood on the wall. Now understand something, that doesn't make you better than the people that you're protecting. It means you're fulfilling a different role within that society and that civilization. And the proper role is one where you have where the people that are, again, doctors and business owners and doing all of the things that make our lives better through providing goods and services and like all of that is wonderful. The guys that stand on the wall are respected for the sacrifices they play when they do that, but they also have an appreciation for what it is that they're protecting. And when that gets disconnected is when you have a real problem within civilization. And so, again, the hope is that we have people that are not only willing to stand on the wall, but also when that time is done, because there is a point where like, okay, my job is not to be on the wall anymore. My job is to do something differently. But it's still about understanding the complementary role that is played. It's not competitive with one another. It's complementary in order to protect civilization from the people that would do it harm.
What a fascinating discussion, Nick. I'm glad to get to know you. People can check out more of your stuff. It's Making the Argument. Nick Freitas. He's on YouTube. Subscribe to his channel. By the way, as we mentioned several times, he's a current delegate at the Virginia House of Representatives and a former Green Beret. Thank you so much, Nick. Glad to have you here on the Will Cain Show.
Hey, thanks for having us on. Appreciate it.
Okay, hope to talk again. There he goes, Nick Freitas. Check him out. Making the Argument on YouTube. All right. Friday night, apparently, I'm the good luck charm. This is what gets us over the top. Almost a 40-point blowout of the Boston Celtics. Now, I don't know. Do we just lean into this moment, enjoy it for what it is, or do we begin to think it's the beginning of a historic comeback? Next on The Will Cain Show.
The world of business moves fast. Stay on top of it with the Fox Business Rundown. Every Monday and Friday, Fox Business reporters, anchors, and hosts will bring you beneath the stock market speculation and boardroom drama to tell you about the biggest business stories of today. Whether you're on Main Street or Wall Street, Fox Business is invested in you. Listen to the Fox Business Rundown every Monday and Friday at foxbusinesspodcasts.com, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you download your favorite podcasts.
Every generation, somebody arises to annihilate us.
A Fox Nation original documentary.
Nearly 50% of Jews in America have changed their behavior for being targeted.
A student came down directly in my face and spat at me.
What's going on campuses now reminds me of World War II.
Just imagine what would have happened if Hitler had TikTok.
Anti-Semitism in America, narrated by Benjamin Hall, only on Fox Nation.
I'm Dana Perino, and this is Perino on Politics.
Dana Perino, co-host of The Five and co-anchor of America's Newsroom, returns to Fox News Audio with a brand new podcast, Perino on Politics. Listeners of Everything Will Be Okay will be thrilled by the return of a familiar voice, but with a fresh spin as Dana guides audiences through the 2024 election cycle. Make sure you subscribe to this series wherever you download podcasts and leave a rating and review.
One more win. One more win for the Dallas Mavericks. And oh, it's on. It's the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel, on the Fox News Facebook page. Always on demand, just hit subscribe at Apple, Spotify, or on YouTube. Hey, let me bring in the fellas, the Willisha, the crew. You know, it's funny, young establishment James, when I hear myself talk, like this is a moment where I know I'm full of it. Like I'm almost trying to... I'm trying to convince myself. I don't even know what you just did or said.
Stephen A. impression.
Oh, but was that what that was? That was horrific.
That was really bad. That was really bad.
How did you even know what that was, two-a-days?
Because he does it all the time in here.
Man.
He does it all the time.
I mean, I don't even know what to make of that.
You know that's what he's thinking when you're putting out these takes.
You just said man. Like,
it's pretty much a
every
show.
time I think about giving you some mic time, you do something like that.
Mute.
What am I supposed to do? I'm not even sure I can recover. If I were up 3-0 and someone had just won a game, I would laugh at their hope. Not their confidence, their hope. And I would feel overly confident. Like, you don't need to win game 4 when you're up 3-0. You kind of don't even need to win game 3. But what happens is it starts to slip a little bit. And then you start to get nervous. You're like, I do kind of need to win this one. Because if I let it get to game 7, that's not good. So the question, at the risk of giving you more mic time, James, is that's not this game for you, right? That's not game 5. You don't feel pressure to win this game as a fan of the Celtics.
Like maybe 2% pressure, but you want to clinch at home.
You gotta.
Now, so if the Mavs win tonight and push it back to Dallas in game 6, don't you start to get a little nervous at that point?
You do, and then maybe the Celtics come out firing in game 6 and clinch it by 30 points.
Now, does it at all ding your confidence that the Mavs won by 38? Like, it wasn't just a win. They won by 38. Does that do anything?
It seemed like a white flag sort of game. Second quarter.
It wasn't at first.
Let's clinch it at home.
Did you just say they didn't try?
You could always tell a game in basketball by the first 6 possessions, and it just the Celtics looked like a flat team on Friday night.
Oh, that's fair, but they didn't wave the white flag until third quarter. That's when they waved the flag. I mean, I looked up at the game, and I was like, who are all these white guys? They literally waved the white flag. I was like, I don't know who all these white guys are on the floor.
Sir, are you guys, a ball boy?
By the way, our franchises, the 2 franchises, are the notoriously white guy franchises, by the way, the Celtics and the Mavericks. But I had no idea you had so many white guys stashed on your bench until the third quarter. And I looked up, and they were all in the game. All of them at one time. And I was like, well, I guess the Celtics have given
hustlers.
up.
One of them's an equipment manager. I think they just took off the sidelines there.
One was from the front office, fresh out of MIT.
Yeah.
I was sitting, I had good seats. I had nice seats. And I was sitting real close to Tim Hardaway. And Tim Hardaway's had a rough playoffs for the Mavericks. So the Celtics waved the white flag, literally. And then the Mavs do too, and they empty their benches. So the entire fourth quarter and a little bit of the third was both teams like into the benches. And my friend, by the way, had a parlay going of like Luka and Kyrie, and they were well on their way to getting their parlay. He was well on his way to hitting, and all of a sudden it just stopped. He got no more points from either. But Hardaway came in and couldn't miss. Did you see that? He was 5 for 5 from 3, and and he hasn't had a good playoffs. I turned to Tim, who I know a little tiny bit, and I think after the second or third 3, I was like, "Come on, Tim, you got to be enjoying this." And he's like, "I am enjoying this." But by the 5th one, even Tim Hardaway was up and cheering. It was an incredible night. I mean, you wouldn't think a blowout would be that fun, but it was incredibly fun to be there in Dallas.
Are you taking credit for the blowout and the win? Is that what you're saying? And for Tim Hardaway's performance?
Not that one, but the rest.
Okay, you're taking credit for it. Okay, I'm writing that down. Okay.
Without a doubt. And I think I'm going to be there for game 6 if we can pull off the win tonight. And so I'm not just rooting to extend the series. I'm rooting to extend the series to Dallas for my presence, where I will be the good luck charm to push us to a game 7. And then all bets are off.
I'm rooting against you guys because it's going to be a lot funnier for the show.
Yeah.
Well, do I even come
in? Well, it's not funny for the Mavs to lose tonight.
No, they need to win tonight for good show content.
Yeah, we got some good stuff planned.
You want this to go 7. You want this to go 7.
6.
That's best content.
I might have to join remotely tomorrow if the Celtics win.
Oh, really?
No, we'll tough it out.
Well, by the way, Dirk brought a guest. He brought a guest. Dude walks in, slicked back hair, got the number 15 tattooed into the side of his head, dressed like a celebrity. I'm like, who is that? Who is that? And he turned and looked at me, and I realized, it's Sergio Ramos of Real Madrid. And, Luka was Real Madrid. And they put him up on the big screen at one time, and Dallas was kind of like, no idea. One of the biggest global superstars and very little reception. So when he walked when he walked by, I was like, Sergio. My friends all made fun of me for this. Big fan.
He's like, cool, bro.
I guess that's not. I guess that. Yeah, he went like this. He covered his heart and said, "Thank you. That means a lot." So he speaks English. We had the conversation a little bit earlier about caging everything you have to say to try to, stay understood. Mike Holsey, I believe on YouTube, said, "I have to say, after 21 years of marriage, you should be able to have an honest conversation, tease each other a bit, and kid on the square." Talking about Sean Duffy and Rachel Campos Duffy. I think he's right. Mommy 007 says, "I don't believe you should lie to your partner. You have to hammer them." What are you laughing at? Her name?
Yeah. When I screen grabbed that one, I thought it was funny.
Surprised you read all
That's the thing. Women. Well, I'm careful. This is like me being able to see it down the road. I mean, I think I got it. I don't think I'm going to get got. Yeah, I think this is the kind of thing women say, but they don't actually believe. I want you to be honest with me, and then you are, and you feel the climate change in the room.
Well, it's also like that thing, for Valentine's Day, they say, "Don't get me anything. I don't want flowers. I don't want anything." But they don't mean that. That's not true. That's a lie. They want something.
Yeah.
And so we have to adapt around that lie and figure it out on our own.
Oh, I'm okay. We can go anywhere.
Yeah. I don't know. I've been married a long time, and you'd like to think that I think that Sean has bought himself. I'm going to find out this weekend. I think he's bought himself this leash. I'm going to find out. I guarantee you Rachel wasn't mad. This is on Being Misunderstood. Joyce Leggett. Go ahead.
Oh, Sean is he's playing a different game, though. I do think his is different. I don't know what it is, but I don't think Rachel cared.
I don't either. Yeah. I think he's all good.
Yeah, I think he's fine.
Joyce Leggett said, this is on the Being Misunderstood thing. Some people don't want you to understand. Attacking you on words you use when in a serious conversation is a diversion. They are uncomfortable with your content. And then, who sent this? Patrick did. I think this is fascinating. This guy on Twitter says, being on Twitter has completely warped the way I communicate. Years of rolling my eyes at people bringing up edge cases and playing devil's advocate under my tweets, it's gotten to the point where I just know every possible objection that someone's going to come up with. And I catch myself now preemptively amending what I have to say with, but the subjective nuances are, and that being said, when talking in real life, I simply cannot provide a short and sweet answer anymore without getting sudden war flashbacks of, well, this doesn't apply to my cousin's dentist dog walker, echoing throughout my skull. And he's right. That's what you end up doing. And this person responds by saying, one of the biggest pieces of life someone once told me, pieces of advice in life someone told me was to be certain and let others disagree. Rather than try to preempt their disagreement, which is controlling behavior and showing subtle doubt, make statements and let others do the disagreeing. It's absolutely right. You can't inoculate yourself to 100% consensus. You're not going to be able to. And in today's day and age, you can't inoculate yourself to 100% lack of offense. People are determined. They're determined. And so you might as well just, boom, say what you have to say and let the chips fall where they may. You don't have to try to be offensive, but just let it go. It's going to be what it is. All right. That's going to...
That's good advice.
All right, we're going to watch Mavs?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I thought you were going to say something 2 days.
I was going to, but I was, that...
You had a breath. You were winding up.
Sometimes you just don't have to say anything at all, is my point. If you just don't need to say anything, just don't say anything at all. That's how I'm going to
Sometimes all you can say is, man, Will Cain.
We're sitting here with Will Cain.
Please end on that.
All right, that's going to do it for me today here on the Will Cain Show. Best of luck for all of us on the Dallas Mavericks tonight. I'll see you again tomorrow right here, 12 o'clock Eastern Time on the Will Cain Show.